Silent scan.
Underground grid connected. Please insert your passkey. Passkey accepted. Downloading payload. Marked. Part 2. The small greenhouse was beautiful. Flowers in every color, shape, and size. Some I had never seen before. You planted all of these? He nodded, giving me a small half smile. For you, he said, coming to stand so that he could peer down into my face. I saw you, that day in town, admiring the flowers. It took me a moment to place what day he was referring to, but soon I put together the memory. One of my first days in the new town, a bouquet on a table in the trading post, I had reached out to touch a velvety petal, just once. We didn't get many flowers in our old town. They were considered luxuries, beautiful but impractical, and most people were too poor to give them a second glance. But here, where some families still held on to wealth, things were different. I looked up at Grayson, who now had a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. You planted all of these? For me? I asked, stunned. He nodded once. Do you like it? I gave him a wide smile and threw my arms around his neck. He stiffened, caught off guard, but then softened. And there, surrounded by the fresh scent of blooming flowers, Grayson kissed me for the first time. What are you proposing? Jefferson's question brought me back to the present. He watched us, face unreadable, green eyes fixed. Jackson, Grayson replied. I frowned. Jackson? The name rang a bell, but I couldn't immediately place it. I glanced between Grayson and Jefferson, hoping for some clue, but both faces offered nothing. Jefferson's expression was unreadable as he stared unblinkingly at Grayson. After a long pause, he said simply, No. Grayson crossed his arms, though his expression didn't change. Why not? Jefferson stood slowly, crossed the room, and poured himself a knuckle's worth of brown liquor. He downed it in one gulp before speaking again. For one, Jackson's mother isn't running for mayor, he said quietly, pouring himself another without looking at us. He took a slow sip, then sighed. And, he continued, turning to face us, they don't have a genetic history like you do. It's one thing to falsify results once, but that boy would be tested every year, just like you are, until he turns 30. Every year we'd have to lie. Boys with a genetic history are 80% more likely to be marked than girls. 30 years, Grayson. I don't like those odds. Fake results. Jackson Miller. It suddenly clicked. Jackson Miller wasn't Fireland's grade. Jefferson must have faked his results to hide that he was marked. That's why Grayson mentioned his name. He was suggesting we do the same. But unlike Grayson, who had to be retested annually due to his family history, Jackson's falsification was a one-time deal at birth. I looked to Jefferson, my husband's best friend, the man who always had a soft spot for kids. I knew he bent the rules sometimes, but this had Grayson written all over it. My husband, who had always been a revolutionary in action. If we could combine my influence in office with his boldness, maybe, just maybe, we could create real change, inspire change in others. Jefferson met my gaze with an apologetic look. He seemed to realize just then that I had been left out of the loop about Jackson, a decision Grayson had likely made to protect me from being implicated if it all went wrong. Though I suspected if things had gone wrong, that plan would have done little to save me. So, Grayson's voice sharpened. It was the closest to yelling I had ever heard from him. So do you expect me to keep up the lie for the rest of his life? What happens when he grows up, Grayson? Jefferson was yelling now. He paused, blinking as he realized it, then sighed deeply. I placed a hand on Grayson's forearm. Jefferson is right. Both men looked at me. The tension in the room eased slightly. 30 years is too long to falsify anything. What if something goes wrong? What if something happens to Jefferson? Or there's a surprise test? If we're caught, we'll all be executed. Or worse, sent to Genesis Island. We have to think about our daughter's well-being. And to that point, I gave them both a sharp look. If I win this election, I'll be held accountable for everything that happens in this town, whether I know about it or not. I want to be informed. Grayson and Jefferson exchanged a look, then nodded. So what do we do? Jefferson asked. Now that they know you're pregnant, they'll be here to run the test in 2 days. I winced at the memory that started this entire mess. If only I'd managed to control the morning sickness, my pregnancy wouldn't have been broadcast to the entire town. Throwing up on live television tends to stick with people. Grayson ran a hand through his dark hair as he restlessly paced a few steps around the room. I knew he was putting his brain to work, trying to think up a solution. He always paced when he was thinking. It was his tell. He muttered something under his breath, something like, "Our daughter's well-being," before turning back to us. "We falsify the paperwork, but only once." Jefferson frowned. I exchanged a look with him before Grayson continued. "Boys with genetic history are 80% more likely to be marked than girls. You said that yourself, Jefferson." "Right," Jefferson said slowly, still not following. "When Firelyn was born," Grayson explained, "they only tested her once. Girls don't have the same odds as boys, even with a family history. So, if my wife isn't having a boy, there would be no need for continued testing, right?" Suddenly, the frown tugging Jefferson's eyebrows downward rose. He blinked a few times as realization set in. I looked at Grayson, the weight of what he was suggesting settling on me. "Let me get this straight. You're suggesting we lie and say I'm having a girl?" I turned to Jefferson, whose jaw was working as he thought. Would that even work? The hospital has surveillance. Hypothetically, but there are several complications with that plan. If we induce labor close to term without alerting anyone, a home birth might not raise suspicion. But what about house surveillance? "We do it here," Grayson said. Jefferson shook his head. "Too risky. They'll suspect something." "The bathroom, then. It's the only room in our house that isn't bugged." I looked at my husband, wondering how he knew that bit of information, but I let it go, a conversation best left for later. "The bathtub should be large enough," he continued. "My mother used to use bathtubs when she had emergency home deliveries." Jefferson looked between us and finally nodded once. He rubbed his chin, thinking, "We can probably keep you and the baby out of the hospital as long as there are no major complications, which, with your medical history, is no guarantee. Inducing labor is a risk in itself." "And if there are complications?" I asked, already bracing myself. Jefferson was silent for a long moment. "It's likely you and the baby wouldn't make it without immediate medical attention, and he will be discovered." Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The weight of Jefferson's words pressed down on us. Then he looked up again, voice grim. "There's another issue. Changing the records won't be enough. Everyone outside this room will need to believe you're raising a girl, which means you'll have to raise him as one, publicly." My stomach dropped. "Force an identity on him?" My voice cracked. "And wouldn't the Genesis cards catch something like that?" Jefferson shook his head. "Not inherently. Although Genesis cards can provide medical information on a person, they only monitor vital signs and act as digital IDs on a day-to-day basis. They don't inherently monitor hormones, and gender is assigned at insertion. Though someone looking could discover the truth, or happen across it with the right prompts in the hospital, should the boy," Jefferson hesitated before continuing, "ever fall ill or require major surgery. For now, Having me as your medical provider means I am the only one who would have access to that information, but it would be something problematic should that ever change for any reason. I looked at Grayson. He was already thinking what I was thinking, and it showed in the pain behind his eyes. "And what about the psychological ramifications?" he asked, looking away. Jefferson hesitated. "Hard to say. But compared to the kind of life he would have if we hand him over to global genesis, as the law dictates," Jefferson trailed off with a sigh. "I don't know if you have any better option if you want him to live." "This is wrong." The words escaped in a strangled sob. "This decision should be his. We are rewriting who he is before he even knows. What if he grows up and realizes we chose the wrong path for him?" I buried my face in my hands, breath shallow and shaking. Grayson wrapped his arms around me. "I believe our son deserves the chance to decide for himself, to live long enough to choose who he wants to be, and every other marked child deserves the same." He gently took my wrists, lifting my head so I had to meet his eyes. "This is temporary, just until we can find a better way." I nodded, heart pounding. I wiped my tears, trying to pull myself together. "For now, we protect him. We share our story through the underground grid. We find other parents willing to fight against the system." Jefferson gave a solemn nod. And then Grayson and I looked at each other. The anger flared in my chest, sharp and ready. "Then," I began, "we start a revolution, and my son will be free to be exactly who he is." This is Blake C. Holloway. We hope you have enjoyed this production of Marked Part 2 by Blake C. Holloway. This program was produced and directed by B. Holla Entertainment. Text copyright 2025 by Blake C. Holloway. Production copyright 2025 by B. Holla Entertainment. All rights reserved. This is a copyrighted work. Unauthorized copying or distribution is a crime. Transmission terminated.